Hey guys, thanks for listening in to CRE Chat Live. Casey and Melissa, we are here, and it is I don't even really know how to start this podcast anymore. It's been so long.
I know, and it's a little bit awkward coming to you from our living room, offices, homes. So it's a little bit of a different podcast these days, but we're still here to recap what we talked about, and we're excited to do so.
And I do want to say that I know everybody's been tuning in on Twitter every week, and usually CRE Chat is only once a month. And so we've been doing this for every week for, I don't know, 2 months, a month, 6 weeks.
I don't know. It all runs together, but I think we've had maybe 4 consecutive series chats back to back. So, and planning on having one again this week.
Yeah, so I know you guys are, if you don't follow along on Twitter, just search hashtag CRE Chat, and you can follow the CRE Chat account at CRE Chat Live on Twitter, and you can always listen to the recaps here that we post on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor FM. So you can listen to the CRE Chat if you don't have a Twitter account. And well, I guess we'll just start on on our topic that we're covering on our podcast today.
Yeah, let's do it.
So today is April 28th. May 1st is coming up, but we are one of the first or second topics that we covered was rent relief. And this CRE chat happened March 26th. So it was coming up right at April. I know in Tennessee, we were about 2 weeks into quarantine and people stay at home orders. And of course, this was a timely topic to discuss, but it was very early what we were seeing come April 1.
Yeah, it was the beginning of the COVID pandemic, and we were actually we had a really great guest that chat. That was Mark Bonner from Bisnow, and they had been kind of covering all angles of how the pandemic was affecting commercial real estate. But we were basically trying to figure out what April 1st was going to look like. That April 1st in commercial real estate was kind of D-Day. That's when we knew the pandemic would have kind of the first round of impact on tenants and landlords. Mainly because, I had started Zoom calls probably a week before that and was talking with some friends, outside of commercial real estate. And they said, how's it going? I said, really don't know yet. We'll see April 1st. And they said, what's the significance of April 1st? And I said, well, that's when rent's due. So as you mentioned, a lot of states had issued stay-at-home orders at that point. And a lot of the businesses that were under stay-at-home orders had to close their doors, which means businesses like restaurants, bars, retail establishments weren't able to, operate as usual as they normally would out of their location, their physical locations.
Yeah, and of course, what the first question we asked, and again, keep in mind, this is only a few days before rent is due for many tenants. And of course, the first question we asked were, what assets are seeing the most rent relief requests?
Yeah, so, I kind of alluded to it, but the obvious answer there is retail. The retail sector saw quite a bit of disruption due to the closures. So, and especially a lot of this retail, I would say large, big box retail and small mom and pops, it ran the gamut. They were all affected. So, a lot of people, everybody that was the obvious answer was retail, but there were other sectors affected as well.
Barbie, something that kind of surprised me, Barbie had said healthcare, and I was like, what, healthcare really? And didn't consider the elective surgeries. And of course, there's a large medical device companies, a lot of them are here in Memphis, and never thought that a knee replacement is an elective surgery. I thought that was something that people need it, but it is considered an elective surgery. So a lot of healthcare and dentists, they weren't able to, continue working.
Yeah. I mean, that all that stuff, that routine kind of visits, that all ended when the stay-at-home orders started. So yeah, a lot of healthcare tenants, you're right, were affected by this.
And it's not just and it wasn't them just asking, hey, can we just not pay rent this month? There are solutions on both sides. Landlords can't just not have their tenants not pay rent. Leading into our second question was some examples of rent relief requests that some of the brokers throughout the country have been seeing.
Yeah. So, and I will say, back to the first question, I think all sectors of commercial real estate were affected. On calls across the platform for Foundry, there were a lot of industrial tenants affected too, mainly because they're tied into retail, or they're tied into some type of activity that maybe was shut down by the stay-at-home orders. But leading into that question too, the type of rent relief requests we have seen, you are absolutely right. Tenants can't just say, forgive my rent this month. That's not how it works. And one of the things that was pointed out was that communication was key, but it's you needed to communicate with a landlord on the front end, because landlords, a lot of them have loans on these buildings, and loan covenants don't just allow them to just give away free rent. So it's really, it was almost like renegotiating. You almost had to go back and renegotiate what your lease was going to look like going forward. Meaning, maybe you're asking for April, May, even maybe June of free rent, but mainly that's rent that would be a rent holiday, not completely free rent. That rent you would pay back later on in your term. So yeah, we saw a lot of 30, 60, 90-day requests for tenants. And due to that request, you would add additional maybe 30, 60, 90 days to the back end of your term. Some landlords were asking for more. I think I read one of the Bisnow articles where the landlord basically said, I would make them do double. If they're asking for rent relief now, I'll make them pay it back in double time at the end of the lease, which I just thought, we all kind of have to, everybody's in the same boat here. You want your tenant to survive the pandemic, because right now, I mean, we've talked about this, nobody's out there touring space. Deals aren't not getting done right now. Most deals, some are, but most deals aren't. So a landlord doesn't want to have vacancy if they have their space filled. So it's to their benefit to work with the tenants on these rent relief requests.
Yeah. Christy Simmons said that she's seen several national landlords give free rent about 3 to 4 months and then straight line amortize it. But local landlords were a bit more challenging to work with.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depended on the landlord, really. I saw smaller landlords that were very cooperative and able to work with tenants. And I think I also read something, national landlords, I think Prologis, that they have put out a number of kind of white papers and a lot of information since the pandemic started. And they said they only granted 7% of relief requests. Now, I will say that some of these requests, a landlord has to be careful. I mean, landlords want the communication, but they also want kind of the data to back up the request. So, a landlord, a tenant may go to the landlord and say, I need free rent, but the landlord may turn around and say, well, show me the data behind why you need free rent. Show me how you've been affected by the pandemic.
Yeah, I liked Gabriel Gonzalez's answers. He said that the most common request that he's seen is deferment for 30, 60, 90 days, like we said. And then some offer to tack it on to the end of the term. Some tenants are just offering to pay operating expenses only. And then some are flat out saying that they're just not paying rent until they can. A month ago, he said it's pretty all over the place.
The tenants that are on that last statement saying they're just not paying rent or maybe not communicating with their landlords, that's not the way to go. That's, I know I saw several national chains maybe put out a press release saying we're just not going to pay rent. I'm not sure that just saying I'm not paying rent is the way to go. And a lot of this also, this again was the beginning of the pandemic. So people are trying to figure out, does business interruption insurance cover this? Most likely no. What about force majeure? Like what are other clauses in the lease that maybe would cover the pandemic? But there wasn't a really good solution out there. And I will say that this was also around the time the SBA PPP loans were coming out. So a lot of landlords were saying, no, these PPP loans will cover rent. So why don't you just go apply for the loan and then come back to me and let me know how that goes? Which wasn't a good answer either.
Yeah, and that leads into our third question of CRE chat. Explain the benefits, drawbacks of the CARES Act and its impact on rent. This was, I think it had just come out right when we started this chat.
Yeah, I think this was the Friday. It came out on a Friday, I remember. And it's interesting because the SBA came out with the act, and then some things started changing by Monday about the rules about how you can spend the money. The money is mainly for small businesses to keep their employees on payroll. So that was the focus of the grants, and they were forgivable. And they are forgivable. So, with them being forgivable, though, that's my day all day long. With them being forgivable, those who were granted the loans were having to apply like 70% of the loan to pay for payroll, which doesn't leave that much money to pay for rent and other expenses that fell under, the types of things you could spend the loan on. So the CARES Act so 70, I was looking at my tweet, 75% has to be used for payroll. So it really didn't offer, the CARES Act wasn't written for landlords, and I get it. Being a landlord right now, especially if you mentioned small landlords, they depend on that rental income. They have loans and they use the income to service their loans, and they were hit hard too. But the PPP loans were not written specifically for rent, even though you could use some of it for rent.
Yeah, Bucky Beeman said some of the benefits are that it will help some businesses make progress to stay open once all this passes. But some of the drawbacks is that it's just a Band-Aid and not a long-term solution to repairing the individuals and businesses that are severely damaged by this.
Yeah, it was great that these small businesses were able to get it. I do know that maybe some small businesses maybe didn't have a good banking relationship and weren't able to get it. And it's great, but it really, he's right. It's kind of a it has a short-term effect. So we haven't yet seen how, with those loans that just, I think, hit people's banks probably over the last couple of weeks. So right now, he's right. It is allowing businesses to stay open and make their payroll and maybe cover some expenses. But there is an unknown out there how, as people start going back to work, how the pandemic, how things are going to change in the world, how consumer habits are going to change. So he is right to that extent.
And at the beginning, we chatted about communication and how just communication between landlords and tenants is just extremely important. Some landlords went ahead and reached out to the tenants prior to the tenants having to reach out to them, just to keep an open line of communication. And again, it works both ways. So question 4 that we had asked, and we'll see question 5 in a minute, it's the other perspective. But question 4 was, what should tenants understand about rent relief from a landlord's perspective?
Yeah, and Mark hit the kind of the nail on the head. He said there's no bailout for landlords, and I just mentioned that the CARES Act again wasn't written for landlords. Bisnow has a great article about this. So landlords really are dependent on if their tenants are going to pay rent or not. They don't. They just didn't have. They didn't have a way to if the tenant doesn't pay, they don't have their own CARES version, CARES Act to cover the loss of income.
And the same thing you had mentioned as well, Paula Dempsey said tenants need to be prepared to provide financial and sales information as well as make some concessions too. For example, waiving exclusives or extending their term.
That's exactly right. It was kind of a dance, it's a give and take, and tenants are going to have to be willing to give some things to get what they needed. I do also think, I know I mentioned this, just I said landlords had been inundated with rent relief requests, and again, not all of them were legitimate requests. So landlords really needed to be skeptical about which ones were legitimate and which ones weren't. It was, again, when tenants were able to provide data about why they were asking, landlords are more apt to look into that and be able to, maybe negotiate with the tenant on the relief. I will also say a lot of the landlords, again, I said they were inundated. I mean, rent relief isn't just like sending an email saying, okay, you don't have to pay rent this month. Landlords have to contact there's attorney's fees involved. You have to have attorneys, you have to create amendments to these leases to put these into effect, which means that it takes time. Landlords are spending a ton of time on this. They have to spend money with their attorneys. So again, they were inundated, and probably those first 2 or 3 weeks, all they were dealing with were restructuring their leases, creating amendments, and working on these relief requests.
And it's a month into it and still having to deal with it. I mean, we don't even know when this might still go till June. The hard thing is we don't really have an answer or an end date to when. I mean, things are likely not going to go back to normal right away. And there's, that's the thing, is we don't have a firm date of when things will be able to get back to the way they were prior to this.
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point, Casey, because really May 1st, there may be another round of tenants that maybe didn't ask in April for rent relief, but now have been a month closed or have lost income. So there may be another round coming May 1st where tenants are going to be asking for relief again. So, and it could be worse than April 1st. Who knows?
Right. Yeah. And so now we'll jump into question 5, the other perspective. What should landlords understand about tenants who are seeking rent relief?
Yeah. Well, Gabriel again reiterates that communication is key. And he said that he was getting a lot of calls from tenants that were trying to reach their landlords, and the landlords weren't communicating with them. Again, those landlords were probably covered up in calls and trying to get back with everybody. But at that point, tenants were really worried because they didn't want to go into default. So communication again is the number one, point. I think, number one point emphasized on this chat this time around. I think you made a good point that it's just another deal negotiation that both ends need to work on. It's something that it takes communication and negotiation, and tenants really need to. Landlords and tenants both need to understand that and be patient with one another.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's still that line of communication, which takes time. Can we do this? Can we not do this? Let's look into this. Is this work for us and not the other? And it like you said, it takes a little bit of time. So answers may not happen, or solutions may not happen right away. It might take a little bit for that to find a common solution.
Yeah, so that being the case, maybe I don't know what a typical lease, how many days not paying rent you'd go into default, but landlords, should be able to at least, gives a little bit of forgiveness on that default while that negotiation and communication is going through.
Right. Coy Davidson said, I think most landlords understand the situation and it's in their best interest to work together to the extent that it makes sense. Landlords understand leasing activity is not going to be pretty as we emerge from the pandemic.
No doubt. Yeah, we stated that once already, and he's right on. It's you and I have seen it. We're just, nobody can tour right now, and I think in some states, brokers are essential. Obviously, we're not here in Tennessee, so that means we're supposed to be staying home, and we're not touring spaces, and most of the industry wasn't set up to tour virtually before this happened. Some were, some weren't. So if you can't tour, it's obviously going to delay that whole process.
Which was another CRE chat topic that we
Yeah.
covered too. So we'll
Yeah.
cover a podcast on that. Everything's kind of changing and we don't know where it's going or where it's going to end up.
We're along for the ride. It's been fun. A lot of
Exactly,
participation, a lot of great input from
that's
CRE
exactly
pros.
what it is. It's a ride and we're all on the same roller coaster. We don't know which way it's going to turn next. And then the last question for rent relief, we asked, what are your top 5 suggestions to tenants seeking rent relief?
Yeah, I was looking at this Rick Kingery. I loved how he was very simplistic in his answer. He said negotiation, and he used the greater than symbol is greater than litigation. So again, another thing we can't emphasize enough.
Eric Ferber mentioned to go ahead and assemble your financials and only ask if you need it. Apply for applicable government aid first. Be reasonable. Don't ask for a year free rent, he used as an example. Communicate with your landlord and don't just not pay and wait for a call.
All good advice. Excellent advice.
Kristen Simmons said, be able to show what you are doing to mitigate cost, get your financials ready, be flexible on potential new lease terms, be reasonable, and listen to your broker.
Oh, I love that last one. And it's interesting. I think tenants really needed to reach out to their brokers because we are talking to each other. We're hearing about what's going on, what landlords are offering, about ways to approach the situation. And I will tell you, and then one of my points was we don't get paid for this to make these requests. Even if you extend your lease, we're probably 99.9% of the time not going to get paid for that extension, which means we are working, just for the benefit of our clients to help them make it through this time. So if you're a tenant and you didn't call your broker, call them now. Pick up the phone and call your broker now. Find a broker, work with the broker. We can help you.
Yeah, and I liked Coy's point. He said that understand that every landlord situation is different. Lender restrictions, debt obligations, asset positions. For tenants with multiple locations, this is not going to be a uniform set of parameters, and every lease situation has to be addressed by itself.
Exactly. Yeah, he's exactly right. Yeah, there was not a one size fits all approach from landlords. It varied, and again, yeah, tenants with multiple locations, absolutely, we're going to have to negotiate each location in itself.
Everybody really had a lot of the same suggestions. Linda Day Harrison, read your lease, get professional advice, take advantage of government programs, talk to your staff and figure out how to make money retooling or doing something else to help keep the company afloat during the crisis. And number 5, don't panic.
That's a good one. It was hard not to panic back then. I think now we've all settled in this reality of COVID, and now whereas back then we were looking at how businesses were closing, like closures as in temporarily closing is what I'm saying. And now and another CRE chat we had focused on, how now are we going to get back to work and reopen our businesses. So back then, I mean, I think there might be even a little bit of uncertainty and a little bit of, that advice rings true now. If you're going to reopen your business, you don't need to panic now. You need to go into it with a good game plan, really thoughtfully. How are we going to open our business back up?
I think this is really crazy that all these topics that we're covering. I mean, we kind of planned CRE chat at the beginning of every year, and I don't think anything we've covered was really on that list.
No, it's been really fluid situation for everybody. It's been fluid for us, but it's been what an incredible time to be on CRE chat right now, because as brokers, we all need each other. We need to learn from each other. And we're all learning as we go. So to be able to come together and spend an hour and give kind of hear what others are seeing across the country, it really benefits us and helps us better serve our clients. So it's been CRE chat couldn't have been more timely during this pandemic, and it's been a really great. There have been some really great conversations.
Yeah, and I mean, there's way more conversations that happen than what we discussed on this podcast. So if you have any time to participate in CRE chat on Twitter when we do it live by tweeting, please create an account and join in. Even if you don't have a tweet or anything to share, you'll probably pick up on something that you can use by everybody sharing and offering advice.
Absolutely. And just if you want to see what we've talked about in past chats, that's really easy as well, because you can go in the search tab of Twitter and just type in #CRE chat. So you can go back and see some of the things that we've talked about, and you don't have to be there the night of live with us to participate. You can go back and read and share and comment today if you want to.
Yep. Well, Melissa, do you have any last words? Anything else you want to share?
No, I want to say I'm thankful for our community of pros that are out there participating in the chats. And this is, again, an uncertain time. It's a time that we can all take a step back and learn from each other. And I'm excited to be part of such a kind of strong and open community that's able to share best practices. So I'm looking forward to the next chat and how our community online is going to be growing throughout this pandemic and as we get back to work.
Kind of speaking of our CRE chats, I don't think we've had as many people on CRE chat as we've been having these past few weeks.
No, you're right. And the last chat was during the NFL draft, which was also virtual. And I remember one broker in particular, who I won't mention, said it was a pretty bold move that we had a CRE chat during the NFL draft. But looking back at that chat, that was the most well-attended chat that we've had to date in the last 2.5 years that we've been doing this. So I think right now we're all kind of hungry for information. We want to share information, and we want to serve our clients the best way we can. And everybody's at home right now. Nobody has an excuse. I mean, you could still turn on the draft and participate. It wasn't that big of a deal. I know Coy Davidson did, and I thought it was really, really a great conversation that we had.
Yep. Okay. Well, tune in this Thursday, every Thursday until we're all back in the office, 7:30 p.m. Central on Twitter, so you can communicate with us live during the chat. If not, stay tuned for the recap article on LinkedIn and also our podcast. Thank you guys for listening to us and participating in CRE Chat on Twitter every week, and we will chat with you in a few days.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.